Furphy, catch, drop.
Get it, Murph! Yeah! Nasty! Oh, he just punched that one.
Another week and another massive Johnny Furphy poster. He is making an absolute habit out of this in the preseason. We saw it in Summer League, and we're going to have a big chat about what Johnny Furphy looks like in Indiana Pacers. You are watching or listening to the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Kane and Olgun back to also break down some NBL action from the weekend. Olgun is in Adelaide, and we saw the Sydney-Adelaide grudge match. It wasn't close on the scoreboard, but we've found some interesting wrinkles we want to bring to the table. Of course, we had some bad stuff going on in New Zealand and Cairns as well. We're going to get to that. And Melbourne, at the moment, they look clearly like the benchmark. And we'll discuss the Chris Goulding, Jack McVeigh incident as well. But first, Olgun, how are you? You are in Adelaide. Another week, another hotel for you.
Yeah, I'm in Adelaide. You know what? This was... I didn't come for the Kings game, right? I know it was the grudge match. I know it was Kendric Davis returning. But I came because I wanted to get a bunch of games in. They played 3 games in 7 days. And this was as close to a playoff game as I was going to see in the NBL. It felt like that from the tip. And I'm excited to talk about it because usually we're very data-driven. But there was some other stuff that I felt that I thought was important. We try not to do feelings here, but I felt like the feelings here were an important part of it.
You can talk about your feelings, Olgun. You're spending an extended period of time in Adelaide, so if you're feeling a little bit down, we can get you back up in this podcast. Let's start with the NBA preseason, though, because we did see Johnny Furphy, and we brought up what ended up sparking a decent conversation on social media. Is Johnny Furphy the best dunker we've seen in Australian basketball? And there was a bunch of old names that came up. That was fun for me to go back and look at some YouTube, but Furphy's looking awesome. He had this poster again against OKC. As I said from the top, he's doing it at a regular basis. And I am curious what it means for him for this Pacers team. Obviously, no Tyrese Halliburton, Miles Turner traded out to Milwaukee as well. So it's a different look. And it does actually look like there could be an opening for Johnny Furphy in year 2. And I would argue he might be the biggest unknown in terms of professional Australian basketballers, because 3 years ago, he didn't even know that he was going to go to a Division I college, let alone be in this position where we think there's a real opportunity for him to play 10 to 15 minutes a night on a decent Pacers team.
So firstly, he gets a poster dunker game these days. I don't know if we've ever seen something like this, especially from an Australian, just someone getting highlight after highlight. This is becoming unbelievably regular. I'm so intrigued at what this season is going to look like for him because we've been around him a lot. The thing that's so underrated about him is how big he is. And you think of the positionally, how the Pacers use those wing guys, Aaron Naismith and Nembhard and Ben Mathurin and these guys. Like, he can step in and play that sort of role, the 3-and-D role. I think there's a handle there that's maybe a little bit untapped as well. The shot is obviously there, and the athleticism is seemingly off the charts. And again, like you said, he's so early in his development. He's such a young basketball player. He just hasn't been playing at a high level for that long. So I'm hopeful that like the development will be expedited over this period of time. But I spoke to him about the gap year with the Pacers and how he can find his openings this season. And I think with less pressure to win, I think there'll be less pressure on Rick Carlisle to play the main guys. And I think someone like Furphy could get a legitimate shot. And all he needs is rotation minutes to properly crack that rotation when they are ready to win again.
I don't even know if they need to make a gap in the rotation. I think the East absolutely stinks anyway. So the Pacers, I think, are going to be competitive. I think they'll be in that 6 to 10 seed range, and Furphy could be there. One other thing that I thought was interesting, and Greg Heyer actually brought this up. I tweeted a clip discussing Johnny Furphy. You sat down with him in Melbourne as well. We played that on Nothing But Net Aussie Hoops. And Greg Heyer said, dunk contest. And I think this would be really cool and potentially a little slice of history for Australian basketball. And people want to be down on things because people just want to be haters about everything. And people find it really challenging to just enjoy something and have fun. But maybe Johnny Furphy is the type of player that's been going young in the NBA. Maybe he could be an option in LA at All-Star Weekend. Hopefully he's playing big minutes, but this would also be very cool. He's proven that he can throw it down with the best of them, and I reckon he's still got a little bit left in the bag that we haven't seen as well, Johnny Furphy. So just very quickly, are you up and down on the idea of Johnny Furphy in the dunk contest?
I'm up for it. Mostly because I don't know what he'd look like. We're seeing poster dunks, we're seeing power dunks.
Blonde hair.
How that translates, I don't know. But I'm excited.
All right. Well, I thought you might be down on that. But Johnny Furphy, either way, it's going to be interesting. They do open their season against the OKC Thunder. Obviously, the two teams are looking very different. And when we talk about the age of Johnny Furphy, it is interesting. He turns 21 in the first week of December, or very early in December. And Tyrese Proctor, I think, has been the other guy that's been fascinating to watch in preseason, because I think we know largely what you're going to get from Josh Giddey. Dyson Daniels has shown some stuff, but Tyrese Proctor, probably the other intriguing product. But he turns 22 in April, so he is older than Johnny Furphy, but he's had 3 years of college, Furphy going into year 2 in the NBA. So the contrast is different. And I think Proctor is interesting because this is where the conversation begins around getting drafted to a really good team, and perhaps the opportunities are difficult. He looks ready to go. I think he's a sure thing to have a long NBA career because he does everything you want. He's got the size and the length, potentially defensively. He shoots the three. He doesn't need to play on the ball. To me, it really strikes me as a guy that's going to be in the league for a long time. But maybe temper expectations a little bit. This Cavs team is good, particularly at the guard position.
Yeah, I've been excited by what I've seen in preseason. He looks like I covered Tyrese Proctor as a junior, and right now he's looking like that guy. The self-creation, the step backs, he can score with the best of them, right? And I think because he's on this Cavs team, yes, he's got a roster spot. He's not a two-way, but between Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell and Lonzo Ball and Sam Merrill, the backcourt is pretty stacked there. So it's going to be very difficult for him to crack that rotation. But I can see him being an elite G League scorer from day one. He's someone who's going to get a ton of shots up. Again, I think he can score with the best of them at that level. And it's cool to see him do it in the preseason environment. He's come out with no fear. That's the most exciting thing about this. He's not scared. He's not thinking like, man, do I shoot this shot? No, he's come out with like an awesome, like almost delusion. Like, I'm ready for this level, even though I haven't proven anything yet. I'm ready for this level, and watch me do it. I appreciate that already for someone who, while he's 22, is a young professional.
I always find it interesting when you hear players and coaches and you see the genuine excitement when they talk about a rookie, because I've been around NBA teams enough to know that if they're not that interested in a guy, they just won't talk about him, or they'll throw out a random cliche. But they seem genuinely excited about what Proctor could do. We both caught up with Proctor a little bit in Vegas, and I remember asking him, you're playing for Kenny Atkinson. What was that first phone call like? He said he loves the Cavs. He loves Kenny Atkinson. He loves playing alongside Donovan Mitchell and learning from these guys, these veterans who, to be honest, this Cavs team is going to be, as long as they stay healthy, a top 2 seed in the East. We saw it with Furphy last year, different scenario, and the development curve is probably significantly sharper with Johnny Furphy than it is Tyrese Proctor. But even if you're not playing, being around a team that's winning all the time and high-level coaches, high-level, all-star caliber players, that's going to help you. So, two guys that I think are interesting to watch, both in the Central Division, little rivalry going on, very close to each other, the Cavs and the Pacers.
With the Central Division? Who knows
raise
divisions?
the banner, man. Hey, they hang the banner. They hang the banner. The Pacers, did they win it? No, the Cavs won it. They got the banner up there, the division banner. So some people still care about that. So I think that is, Central Division rivalry between the Aussies. So we'll see how they go. NBA season. This time next week when we podcast, it'll be Christmas Eve for NBA fans. Next Wednesday morning, it all gets started. ESPN, your home for hoops. You'll be able to check that out. So we're going to talk a lot more about the NBA. And I did just think, as we were discussing, 2 guys potentially in the mix for the Boomers in the World Cup. Maybe in the next week or so here, we need to not discuss it with each other and put together our little 12-man squads for the World Cup in 2 years' time and bring it to the podcast. So maybe we can do that in a little bit there. The Boom is always a fascination for fans, but get involved. What did you see with Furphy? What did you see with Tyrese Proctor? The other Aussies, the ESPN Australia YouTube page, on our socials. Reach out to us and we can chat about that. Let's move to the NBL, Olgs, and you are in Adelaide yet again. To me, it looks like you're in a 5-star hotel. If you're watching on YouTube, just some beautiful drapes and looks like some shiny pillows you've got there on the couch, because you were at this Sydney-Adelaide game. So in the end, and this was a game, a genuine NBL game where, I woke up and I'm like, I want to watch this game. I want to see 2 teams that I think could be potentially in the mix. There's a little bit of extra, there's a little bit extra going into this game. 2 rivals, the Kendric Davis scenario here. But what was your big takeaway? Because in the end, Sydney comprehensive. They blew the doors off the 36ers, which was impressive. But there are a lot of other little wrinkles in this one as well.
Yeah, so Kendric Davis came into this game. Obviously, there was some back and forth with the 36ers over the offseason. He obviously didn't
Yes.
re-sign here in Adelaide. And so he went into the game. He said he felt nervous. And you could sort of see it too. Like we forget Kendric Davis is a young professional. So he felt nervous going into it, and you could tell when the game started, there was an air ball. There was some chirping back and forth, and it seemed like he just needed a bit of time to find his footing. But once he did, I think the Kings overall found their footing, and they did a really good job. When I say they, I mean Matthew Dellavedova and Kwiatnoy and Xavier Cooks and that whole team, through to Gorge and that coaching staff, of, I say, protecting Kendric Davis, but making sure that they were ready for the moment. And that was one of the takeaways from this. Yes, you can talk about the defense from Delhi and Bull Kual and Jalen Galloway on Bryce Cotton, because that was very important. But this was a game that the Sydney Kings looked prepared for. They looked like they were ready for the fight. And again, this is something that's not quantifiable. It doesn't really matter, right? This isn't data. But you could tell that the Kings were going into this playoff environment ready for the fight, and the 36ers just weren't quite up to it. They weren't ready for it. And I thought that was notable going to this game, and that's why a 20, 30-point win for the Sydney Kings is not a complete
why
surprise.
Sydney? Let's break it down then. Why were Sydney like this? Because to me, I'm looking at this Sydney team, and we've seen the talent for the last 2 years, and I know there's been changes of head coaches, but I felt like there's been a lot of excuses coming out of Sydney as to why they haven't played at their best. Last year, there was a lot of, well, we don't have a guard. We don't have a point guard. Only 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago against Melbourne, it was like, well, we're outmatched. Xavier Cooks is playing small ball 5. He's tired. A lot of excuses for a team that is jam-packed with talent. So, yes, they got up for this game, and I think it's a big tick for vibes in the locker room, because to me, it tells me that this team does care about Kendric Davis. They wanted to win for him. This was a massive day for him. I thought they looked after him through the game. When he was fraying emotionally a little bit, you saw Delhi get over to him and talk. When there was that a little potential scuffle, Bull Quell straight in there, stand in front of Kendric Davis. So to me, it says the team is on the same page. But to me, it also says no more excuses, because we've seen the benchmark. You just beat an Adelaide team that is red hot. You dominated them defensively. You shared the ball offensively. So I don't want to hear any excuses if you lose a game to a mid-table team in a week's time on a sleepy Sunday afternoon, because I think the effort fluctuates. And as you said, you can't really quantify that. But now this is the benchmark. So they need to bring that every single week.
Well, yeah, when we spoke about this last season on how the Sydney Kings, I think they were 16 and 13. They didn't really beat the top teams.
No.
And every time they won, it never felt good. You never felt comfortable. It was always, yeah, they won the game, but they're clearly not it. Like they weren't up to it, right? They weren't one of those teams. And I felt that way all through last season. I felt that way all through the Mahmoud Abdel Fattah era as well, where, yeah, they won a bunch of games, but it never felt good. This win over Adelaide was the most real win that this team has had, I think, since Chase Buford was head coach. This was the most meaningful win, and the most, I think, telling win that this team has had. This is, like you said, I think this is now the expectation. If you're able to do this in that environment where defensively, I think this is what they're supposed to be, especially with the length and the personnel they have. And offensively, this is what they wanted. Delhi as the floor general, the ball whipping around, getting it through hands, and then Kendric Davis finds his spots within it. It's as comfortable as I've seen them look offensively in the past 2 seasons. And defensively, it's exactly as advertised. So again, this is the expectation now. This is a win over a really good team, as an Adelaide team that I think is going to be toward the top when it comes to the pointy end of the season. And this was a very real win for the Sydney Kings. And I couldn't say that about that team over the past 2 seasons.
So Tasmania are up next. Ignite Cup, which I think we're all enjoying through 1 week. Disney Plus, of course, ESPN on Disney Plus. You can check out that game there. So it's a perfect challenge for me. Tassie, a team that brings it every single night, regardless of whether they're at their best offensively or not. So it'll be a nice challenge for them. Just quickly on the Bryce Cotton defense, I just looked up some of the numbers. So he was 3 for 10, 7 points. He hasn't had fewer than 10 field goal attempts in at least a couple of seasons in the NBL. Last year, when Bryce Cotton played Sydney, as we mentioned, defensively a pretty good Sydney team. He was 4 for 13 for 20 points, went to the free throw line a stack, and then he was 10 for 28. So the last 3 times Bryce Cotton's come up against this Sydney defense, 17 for 51 from the floor, 33%. So, again, it just tells you that Sydney does have the pieces to get the job done here. You were in the press conference, so Adelaide wins a game a few days before that. And you were talking to Isaac Humphries a little bit there. He was in the press conference, and he said some interesting stuff, but I don't know if you remember when we were in Melbourne 2 weeks ago, and I said, I just hope that Sydney doesn't go for the shiny Adelaide, sorry, doesn't go for the shiny new object and bring in a star when Isaac Humphries is right there. Like they've got all the pieces to work. I didn't think it was my best analogy, and I was thinking, what is Isaac Humphries? Isaac Humphries is the pizza shapes of this Adelaide team because he's always there. He's the old reliable. You can always go to it, and it is solid, and it will get the job done. And Adelaide, for too often, have been going to the nacho cheese variety, the new variety, and then you get it, and then you realize that it's just not as trusty. It's just not as reliable as Isaac Humphries. And I think we're seeing him get back to his best. 17 points, around 5 rebounds, over a block per game. He's still too foul prone. He's got to be better. But the Adelaide 36ers, I think, just come back to the old pizza shapes, Isaac Humphries, and I think the vibes will be good for this team. He's a guy that you got to get the ball. He's shooting 75% from the floor. I like what I'm seeing from Isaac Humphries.
Yeah, look, we can have discussions about this analogy, this pizza shapes metaphor. We'll have like a discussion about this because I feel like that's not entirely your best work.
I regret it, to be honest. But...
I can see. Look, the thing that Isaac said in the press conference that I found so interesting was he felt like indignant. It was, I've been good for 10 years. And yes, there have been ups and downs. Every player goes through ups and downs.
He hasn't been good for a few years. That's okay. We can say that. He's been highly inconsistent.
For sure. When Scott Ninnis joined as head coach, the second half of that season, he was elite. And then the first season under Mike Wells, next to Montrezl Harrell, he wasn't great. Again, a lot of the circumstances dictated his performance. But in his mind, he's always been a great player. He just needs to be put in positions to succeed. And right now, I think he is. And I think it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that the combination between him and Bryce Cotton is working so well. Because Bryce Cotton is someone who's a willing passer. I think he's an underrated passer. And someone like Isaac Humphries is very sneakily mobile. And he's able to roll quickly toward the rim. He's able to catch it in the short roll, put it on the floor. He can finish really well around the rim. His touch is great. So he is a seemingly perfect fit next to Bryce Cotton. So again, it's no surprise that that's working. But I agree broadly with your analogy, while I don't agree with the actual substance of it. And I think the 36ers agree too, which means they're going to go get another import at some point. And the first one, they got Nick Rakocevic, just meat and potatoes, a big man who is very useful. I think they will go get another big, potentially like a 4-3 type maybe. And I think that guy will just be very useful. Again, they don't need to reinvent the wheel. They don't need to get another superstar. They just need to get someone useful because the pieces are there, right?
I think so, yeah. And I just think like it's okay to say, I do think when I say that Isaac Humphries has been inconsistent, I don't think that he's been anywhere near the player he can be for 2 or 3 seasons. He has at times. I don't necessarily think it's his fault because it was an absolute dumpster fire in Adelaide last year and everyone understands that. So, but now they're in a position where they can and just like continue to build this roster. I'm not put off too much by the loss to Sydney. It was just one of those things. They had a really, really bad day. That's not going to happen to Bryce a lot. I thought Mike Wells spoke really well in the postgame. If you haven't heard the postgame, go back there. Olgs was there. I thought he spoke really well about this team. That's probably enough on Sydney and Adelaide, though. I think, 2 teams that are good. One team that I don't think is very good, New Zealand. And I know it's only early in the season, Olgs, but it's real sicko stuff if you're watching New Zealand, Southeast Melbourne at midnight on a Saturday night like I was. But hey, I love the league. I'm watching all these games. And, Southeast Melbourne and New Zealand fans would still be watching this game. But by the time that this game finished, I was so annoyed at what I saw in the last 5 minutes from this Breakers team and the Breakers coaching staff. And I always say this, I think coaching is the thing that we know the least about, sitting from the outside. There's so many different nuances. There's so many different things that go on in a game. But New Zealand, I don't know how many games they're going to win this year. I'm not big on this team. But they're leading the Phoenix 75-73 with 4:25 left on the clock. And Sam Mennenga has been the only guy on your team offensively that was consistently producing. He was putting up an absolutely massive night. Now, there was a turnover between Mennenga and Carlin Davidson. He gets subbed out of the game for Rob Lowe. He was out of the game for 1 minute and 3 seconds. And what happened in that time? Owen Foxwell walks into a 3 because Rob Lowe's dropping back. He's worried about the dribble penetration, knocks down the 3. Next possession, John Brown gets the mid-range, knocks down at mid-range, and all of a sudden, you go from a 75-73 lead to a 75-78 lead. They only score, 3-4 more points in the game. Mennenga was the guy that scored those. I don't understand what they were doing. I was sitting there thinking, this is like NBA stuff in March where you're like, okay, we don't really want to win this game. Our best player is playing really well. Let's just sub him off for a minute or two here and just sneakily ensure that we don't win the game. This has been my problem with Mennenga in the past. He's 23 years old. I think he's highly, highly talented. And I think they've just messed around with him too much with the rotations. And unless there's stuff going on behind the scenes, I don't know. But I just thought it was absolutely absurd. And in the end, there's other reasons why they lost. But that sub, to me, was insanity.
Yeah, very quickly. I don't think there's anything happening behind the scenes, obviously. But the thing with this team, especially, is that they're not deep in any way. So there are teams that know we've got to play our main guys 35 minutes. That's just the reality
30.
of how you're going to have to compete.
What do you reckon he got out of that 60 seconds on the bench? You know, they called a timeout anyway once they gave up the 5 points.
He's also one of the most like pronounced physical specimens in the league too. Like he can handle another 60 seconds on the court. So again, it's for teams that don't have depth. And when you look at this team between Parker Jackson Cartwright and Sam Mennenga, these are two elite guys or guys who can be elite on any given night. These guys have to play 35 minutes a game. It's just the reality. And the same goes with their imports, again, because their depth just isn't there. So I'm with you. I don't like the idea of, man, let's buy a minute here. Because a minute in the NBL, there's 3 possessions that can lose you a game.
Malpractice from the Breakers. You lose the 5 points and you call a timeout anyway. So if it's just to get the guy a breather, just call the damn timeout 60 seconds earlier and win the game. They're 1-5. They are on top of the Ignite Cup standings, though. So, maybe the Breakers can win a stack of cash for their locker room there. But that was frustrating to me. Olgs, you had some thoughts on Cairns. Look, things aren't going well. I think it is fair to say at this point in time. But what have you seen with the Cairns Taipans so far? Another blowout loss to Melbourne United.
All right. So the Cairns Taipans. This is a team that finally had money to spend. And I think they spent it unbelievably poorly. I think they were so misguided in this roster build. And we knew it from the get-go, and we saw it through the blitz. And no one within that organization was aware enough to sort of raise some red flags here. You build a team, firstly, so late in the piece, so you don't have any time to come together. And then you build a team with no ball carrying, when the theme across world basketball right now is to get bulk ball carriers. And then you have guys like Jack McVeigh, Rain Smith. These are 2 players, for example, who I think can excel off the ball. If you put them with a point guard who can create advantages, then they can play off them in a really elite way. And they just didn't sign any point guards. And so this is a team that I think was built extremely poorly. We saw during the blitz, they couldn't get the ball out over half court. And what has been a theme over the course of this season, they lead the league in turnover percentage, and they have the worst offense in the league by a country mile. I think this team was so poorly put together. I think it's a waste of someone like Jack McVeigh as a talent that they don't have a team that can functionally get into offense. And unfortunately, I think Admiral Schofield is one of the least effective imports in the NBL. And I think everything he was sold as this rugged, high-level defender who can make plays on the offensive end, I don't think he's any of those things, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I'm not as harsh on Cairns as you are, and you can mess up a roster, and we've seen teams do this all the time, particularly when it comes to imports. They obviously had a late import change as well, which hurts you. I don't want to be too critical on Cairns for going in and spending the money. This is the first time that we've really seen them go in and do that. So they spend all this money. I think you have to do that to compete. I think it is also going to be a bigger discussion that we should have at some point with the way that the league is looking right now, with Cairns looking bad, Brisbane looking bad, New Zealand looking bad, and at the same time, you're talking about expansion. Like, I think that's a genuine concern and something that, I asked the CEO, Dave Stevenson, about it, a couple of weeks ago. I think it's something to look at. I don't think we can crucify the Cairns Taipans, though, for spending the money. I agree that the roster doesn't look right, but they also don't look healthy. And pretty much any team that we've seen that makes a really early import change historically are usually struggling. And I don't know about Jack McVeigh. I know you were posting some stuff about his shot attempts. He doesn't look healthy to me. I don't know if you've got some news there.
I think he's injured. I was told that there's bone bruising in his wrist or his hand, and it's affecting the way he's able to get shots off.
It will make sense.
But man, like no one's criticizing this team for spending. We want them to spend, and with the spending, they've openly said we now have expectations, so we want to be treated like a real team, right? Which is great, and so that's what we're doing. I think they spent their money poorly. I think they allocated that money in a really silly way. They just didn't get ball carrying. Adam Ford teams have consistently been in the bottom three in offense. This has been a consistent thing since he got to Cairns, and this season is no different, unfortunately. And the last thing on this is I spoke with Jack McVeigh in the preseason, and he said something that was really, really interesting, and I thought it was quite smart, but I don't know if he realized what he was saying. He said, "I'm the best player on a team when I'm the third best player on a team." And I don't think he realizes that on this team, he's the best player on the team. And so I don't think they're able to fully get the optimal version of Jack McVeigh because the pieces aren't in place to maximize him. And I think that's really clear. And the same goes for Rain Smith. I think you can't expect Rain Smith to bring the ball up the floor consistently. That's not his game. He's not able to get open looks because there's no advantage creators on this team. I think there are cool individual pieces on this team, but it is completely wasted by having zero ball carrying. And when this team can't get over half court and they get into their offense with 9 seconds left on the shot clock, I think it's just a recipe for failure. And it's not a surprise that they've lost 3 of their first 6 games by more than 30 points.
Yeah, it's bizarre that they are 2-4. To your point, they're not asking for excuses, though. I think you lose your starting center. You have that early import change. I think most teams outside of Melbourne, who seem to be able to avoid any type of ripples at all, they would have some struggles. And ultimately, I know you're not saying this, but it's good that they're spending. But yeah, it doesn't look like they got the right roster there to compete this year in NBL 26. But I mentioned Melbourne, so let's have a little chat about Melbourne, who right now, this has been the time, Olgun, in the last 2 years where I said Tassie can go all the way, Illawarra can go all the way, and I really wanted to pick a team.
Are you going to do it?
I wanted to pick a team that was on the outside. That's what I like to do. I like to pick a diamond in the rough. Melbourne looks so far better than every other team in the league right now. I don't know how to pick anyone else. That's no guarantee that they're going to win a title, but they look elite. They blew the doors off Cairns, which maybe isn't that impressive as it stands right now. The one thing I did want to drill down on and make sure we get to this, the Chris Goulding, Jack McVeigh, it was an unsportsmanlike foul. It was in the third quarter. There was clearly some frustration there. Lots of chat about this afterwards, and yes, it seems that any incident that Chris Goulding is involved in, there is going to be chat and discussion and perhaps some biased discussion from everyone that does not care about Melbourne United. What did you see?
Jack McVeigh knew what he was doing. It was a shoulder to the head of Chris Goulding. Yes, Chris Goulding is known to embellish. That aside, I thought it was like an obvious unsportsmanlike. If they ejected Jack McVeigh, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. I would have thought, sure, I get it. It's a shoulder to the head.
That would have been soft.
I think it's objectively a dangerous play though, right? In the way that we protect the head these days, I would understand it, right? I'm fine with it not being an ejection. I'm fine with it just being an unsportsmanlike. But I thought it was premeditated enough from Jack McVeigh. I think he knew what he was doing. Yes, Chris Goulding sold it, and maybe that plays into the decision too. That hey, this was probably like a 8 out of 10 contact, but because it's Chris, we'll call it a 6 out of 10 because we really can't make that determination because he sometimes embellishes. So I get that part of it too. I thought it was premeditated enough, and I thought the play was dangerous enough that unsportsmanlike I was fine with.
Yeah, this wasn't a Chris Goulding flop, and this is part of the conversation we've had. We're in a really bad spot with Chris Goulding where that's just going to be the talking point of everything. That's not it. So just forget about that. Like he got laid out. Like let's be real about this. Yeah. If you watch the whole play, 3 seconds before this, Tom Coppins was coming down the floor, and he did make a move to charge at Jack McVeigh. Now, you can say whether you think that it was dangerous or not. It wasn't. It was just a physical play that's in a basketball game. But in my head, there's no question that McVeigh was annoyed about that, and then he took it out on Chris Goulding. I don't think he went directly for his head. He's a bigger guy. He just stepped into him. No, it's not a play you want to see all the time. It's not an ejection. It was an unsportsmanlike foul. That's a big enough penalty. And the reason I think that it was nothing is because Melbourne, no one did anything. And you can say that they didn't see it or whatever. They saw replays. No one really cared. They're just like, all right, yeah, it's an unsportsmanlike and get on with the game. So we carry on a little bit too much. And to me, yes, you don't want to see that all the time. If that became a thing you saw 5 times a week, then maybe you need to escalate it, but you just don't. It was frustration. It was a poor play from Jack McVeigh, but that's it. Not a big deal.
They were down 30. Right, they were down lots. I get
20 plus.
The frustration played a role in that too. Very quickly on Melbourne, have they gotten out of second gear yet? It looks like Dean Vickerman is just throwing random lineups out there to see how they work. Like there was like a no import lineup in the second quarter. He starts Dash Daniels in the third to start the third quarter. They're kind of messing around right now. Like they're not out of second gear. It's unbelievably impressive without Shea Ely, without Chris Goulding for this entire time. They are the obvious gold standard right now. Jesse Edwards is playing unbelievable basketball. Tyson Walker is awesome. Milton Doyle hasn't found his footing yet, but he's just seemingly fit in that team. They're just a really organized, well-functioning basketball team. They're very impressive to watch.
Best offense right now, best defense right now. They got a pretty easy run over the next 3 or 4 games. The Melbourne United just absolutely look like they're cooking. I've got optimism for the other teams, for your Adelaides, for your Sydneys, for your Perth Wildcats. We didn't get to them today. We need to see a little bit more from the Wildcats, but I like what they're doing over there under John Rillie. So I think we've got some contenders, and we know from the NBL that whatever you see at the top, it doesn't necessarily translate all the way through to February when the championship gets decided. But that was good stuff from you today, Olgun. Once again, just traveling the country now. Get some work done. I know Adelaide sometimes can, you can get caught up in everything that's going on in Adelaide, but look after yourself over there, mate. Enjoy the hoops, and we'll be back next week. As I said, maybe a Boomers, squad chat. Maybe we need to get into that NBA starting next week. There's a lot going on. This was the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. As I said, get involved in the show, rate, review, do all those things. Reach out to us on social media, and we will see you all next Tuesday.